For over a decade, Tim Cook has maintained Apple's reputation as the ultimate walled garden. The company operates on a strict philosophy. They demand total control over their hardware, their software, and the privacy of their users. But Apple is now preparing a deal that contradicts all of that. They are planning to pay their biggest rival, Google, $1 billion a year to power the artificial intelligence behind Siri. Outsourcing the intelligence of the iPhone breaks Apple's most sacred corporate rule. Historically, they insist on building and owning the core technologies that drive their devices. With immense resources and a 12-year head start in voice assistants, Apple somehow fell so far behind that they now have to rent a digital brain from a direct competitor. To understand exactly how far behind they are, look at this side-by-side comparison. A language model's capability is often measured in parameters, essentially the number of connections in its artificial brain. Google's custom Gemini model operates on an estimated 1.2 trillion parameters. Apple's internal models max out around a tiny 150 billion. Seeing this deficit, top researchers and executives began leaving Apple, migrating to better-equipped AI labs at Meta and Google. This technical decline was a choice, the byproduct of two specific, decade-long stories that had been unfolding simultaneously inside Apple's headquarters. The first issue was Project Titan. Beginning in 2014, Apple launched a highly secretive initiative to build a fully autonomous electric vehicle. Apple set an extreme objective. They would leapfrog the entire industry by launching a Level 5 autonomous vehicle with no steering wheel or pedals from the very start. While Apple poured billions of dollars and thousands of engineering hours into an impossible automotive dream, their competitors spent those same years heavily investing in the foundational machine learning models that power today's generative AI. When Apple finally canceled the car project in early 2024, they immediately redirected the remaining staff to the AI division. To the rest of the tech industry, it looked like a desperate attempt to salvage a failing department. By attempting to skip years of development to reinvent the automobile, Apple neglected their existing software ecosystem. They effectively sidelined the artificial intelligence they already had, and they used to have a dominant lead. Back in 2011, Apple introduced Siri as the flagship feature of the iPhone 4S, long before Alexa or Google Assistant existed. But following the death of Steve Jobs, the company's hardware-focused leadership struggled to understand how a digital assistant actually required continuous iteration to improve. Instead of updating Siri's intelligence constantly in the background, Apple tethered its improvements to the slow, annual iOS release cycle. They treated machine learning like a physical product. Internally, engineers grew frustrated. Rather than rebuilding Siri's aging, flawed infrastructure from scratch, management patched it together with mismatched code from smaller startup acquisitions. Applying a rigid once-a-year update schedule to a technology that requires constant learning turned a groundbreaking voice assistant into a stagnant, unreliable punchline. When ChatGPT launched in late 2022, the reaction inside Apple Park was one of pure panic. The tool instantly exposed how far Apple's own machine learning efforts had drifted from the cutting edge. A turf war broke out inside Cupertino. The Siri engineering team moved too slowly to catch up, directly clashing with a marketing department that desperately needed new AI features to sell hardware. The result was the iPhone 16 launch. Apple heavily promoted a suite of features dubbed Apple Intelligence. But when the phones reached consumers, the promised software was largely missing or delayed. Years of internal friction forced them to overpromise on unfinished technology, breaking Apple's long-standing reputation for perfect execution. Looking at their internal dysfunction and the rapid pace of their competitors, Apple realized they could not win the current AI arms race, so they waved a white flag. They shifted their strategy from trying to build their own core intelligence to simply buying it. Ironically, this capitulation might be an accidental masterstroke. Companies like Google are burning tens of billions of dollars on data centers and compute power, while Apple avoids the hardware cost and focuses entirely on the user experience. This graphic illustrates the new logic. Think of the large language model as a heavy, expensive operating system. Apple is positioning its Siri integration as the sleek, high-margin app that sits neatly on top of it. By outsourcing the brain, Apple lets its rivals bear the crushing financial burden of training these massive models, as long as Apple gets to rent the final product. Still, the collapse of the car project and the stagnation of Siri remain a massive blow to the ego of the world's most valuable brand. The Gemini deal transitions Apple from a fiercely independent innovator into a company dependent on a rival for its most critical future feature. The scale of modern AI has reached a point where even a tech empire with infinite cash can no longer afford to build everything alone.